So what can go wrong, I suppose, is something I want to really highlight with you today. So here's a couple of things that can go wrong. There's a few of these I'm going to drill into. So the process of voting call land to non-call land, I've seen that done very well and also done very poorly. Getting a bad deal is always a concern for a club, or partnering with the wrong developer. Due diligence not done properly can lead to insolvency, and I'm going to drill into that more. Not getting a full turnkey club. So there's often a lot of exclusions in these contracts, and that is really critical to get a handle on that. And I can guarantee you the exclusions list will be buried in page 174 in the fine print at the back of the contract that they don't want you to see, because that's something they certainly hope you gloss over. Not creating ongoing revenue. So that's something that's often an issue with these projects is you set out to create a better financial position for the club, but then if you don't create the ongoing revenue, you haven't actually created a better financial position for the club or the not-for-profit. You know, we do this sometimes with disability groups, aged care, same sort of challenge. And understanding the feasibility and if the developer is absorbing or hiding money, that's a really common problem that we see. And a lot of organizations don't even look into the feasibility. And I'm going to go through with you why that's so critical. So the call land to non-call land, Castle Hill Country Club are a very publicly known case study on this. So I'm not speaking about anything that isn't sitting in the newspapers at the moment. If you Google this, it was actually a couple of years ago now. So they went through a joint venture process with Sekisui House. Sekisui House is a global developer. They're very well known, first tier, big brand. They're not sort of one of the dodgy small guys. They, by all intent and purposes, tried to do everything right with their call to non-call land vote. They went to the members, they told them about the project, they relayed the information. They were very clear in their correspondence. They went through that journey with the members and laid it all out, got it voted to go from call to non-call land for the purposes of this development project. And after that, when they were well into the swing of it, and the process of millions and millions of dollars invested from Sekisui House, and I'm sure the club probably had some money invested too at that point, one member challenged them on this and put an injunction over the project and challenged them on it and said, even though you told us what the vote was for, you didn't give us detail around the commercial elements of that. So for example, he said, you might have been getting, and just to pick a random number, we might have been getting $5 million out of the deal. You didn't tell us that. I would have voted no if I'd known it was 5 million, because I would have expected us to get 10, whatever those numbers might have been. So his contention was not that he didn't want it to be done, the development, it was that he didn't think the actual commercial deal the club had struck was good enough. And because they hadn't been given that information, he felt that they weren't fully or properly informed. And he won. The courts said, yep, you got to go back and fully and properly inform them now and tell them the commercial elements of the deal. So that was a very costly, very frustrating process for the club when they thought they were doing everything right. And this is something I come up against with clubs and not-for-profits all the time. I actually went through this conversation with one of my directors just the other week. They're doing a major project. They've had permission off their board and their members to do leasehold structures, but the leasehold has gone from doing lots of little leaseholds on their site to a major one that basically envelops the whole site and basically redevelops the whole site under one major leasehold structure. And they said, oh, that's fine, we don't need to go back to the members. And I said, well, I think you do. And when they went back to their solicitors after I had to probe and prod them to do so, their solicitors said, oh, that would actually constitute a disposal of land because it's a 99-year lease over the whole site to one party. That's effectively going to meet the test of disposal of the site. Even though you're retaining it, you actually aren't retaining it for your main purposes in your constitution as the bulk of the site. They were only getting a small proportion, about 20% of the site, to retain for their own purposes under their constitution. So this can't be done poorly. This can't be circumvented. And don't think lack of detail is going to be helpful to you, because an injunction can be set after the fact and it's a very costly thing to go through. So you actually do need to bring to the table the due diligence you've undertaken, the financial elements of it. And I can tell you now, most developers don't want you doing that. So there's always this little bit of contention backwards and forwards with that. So speaking of due diligence, this is one, Indooroopilly, which is up in Queensland, bowling club. They did a joint venture project with a developer called Arden Group. We had to do some due diligence on some clubs generally that had done joint ventures and it hadn't worked out for the club. They'd become insolvent through the process. This is one example that we came across. So this bowling club, what actually went wrong for them? So you can see those units behind there. That was what the developer developed for them. Now, to be fair to Arden Group, very nice units that they developed, great product. But what happened was they didn't get a turnkey club. So they got a very small financial deal out the back of it. So the actual cash they took out of the deal was very, very minimal. They got a new club, which was great, but the cash they took out was minimal. Then when they finished the club, and then they had to go spend their $5 or $6 million on actually finishing off the club, which they'd signed off to, but they didn't see the devil in the detail. They then had to go spend that money on finishing off the club. That then absorbed all their cash position. And then when they opened their doors, they had a bigger, more expensive club to run, and they didn't get their membership and they didn't get their gaming people back as quickly as they'd hoped. And there's actually a lot of data out there that shows it does take quite a bit of time to bring back your loyal gaming clients to get your gaming revenue back up to where it was before you close your doors. There is something about continuity of trade to be considered when you do these, if you can stay open in any sort of capacity. So this was certainly one where they actually ended up becoming insolvent, and that was the end of that club. They had to amalgamate. Actually, they ended up selling the site, actually. So that's just something to be aware of, that when you're working with a developer, when they say they've done all these past projects, actually drill into what the projects were, speak to the board members, find out how they went. Just because they've done them doesn't mean they did them successfully. And what was it that could have gone wrong in those processes? We got one for a not-for-profit, not a club, that sent us through a developer. They're looking at joint venturing within disability space, actually, to provide disability housing. Said, oh, can you do the due diligence on this developer? And the developer's company name was something like developer number 5. So the first thing we did was look at developer company name number 4, 3, 2, and 1. And what do you know? They'd all gone bankrupt, and they all left a string of, of unhappy trades and contractors behind that they owed money to. So, some of them make it really easy. That was a really easy one, but a lot of them don't make it easy because they are open and closed companies, on the daily. But it is a process that you need to go through. And if you're going into a major project and you have not engaged someone, not just your solicitor will do ASIC searches. It's beyond that. It's actually looking at past projects, talking to people involved in past projects, looking at defects, looking at community harmony, going through the DA register to see if they've had any complaints come out of that process. Going to local building inspectors is something we often do. If they've been doing building inspections inside these properties and finding building defects are popping up 4 or 5 years later, like there's a whole lot of investigative work that we can do, and other companies I'm sure can do as well. It's well beyond the scope of what your solicitor would do to look at that solvency piece and that due diligence around the developer's reputation. If you're joint venturing with a developer and you haven't done this, I don't care if you think you know them, like everyone we speak to, when they say, oh, we've known this developer for years, they're great, you still got to look into this stuff. It's really, really critical. So what is a turnkey club? So this is one of the problems we see. Now, I'm going to share with you a list out of one project. So turnkey in theory should mean you walk in, you turn the key, you're done. Everything's done for you. You open your doors, you trade on Monday. They give you the key on Friday, you trade on Monday. In theory, that's what that should be. And that's what we see in all these contracts. We'll give you a turnkey club, and that's the conversation that gets had. This is an example of a list of exclusions out of one of the projects that we looked at. And again, this was hidden in version 7 of the contract that was developed. No one really saw this until we pointed it out, because we went looking for it. So exclusions included kitchen equipment above and beyond the nominated provisional sum. I can tell you now, once we got a QS to look at that provisional sum was completely inadequate for the size and scope of this particular club that was being budgeted out. They were looking at millions of dollars on top of that. Loose equipment or furniture items, they had a budget of $300,000. Again, the QS said that wouldn't have covered even hardly any of their loose furniture items that they needed. This was a significant club space that was being developed. Caterers equipment, glassware, poker machine bases and chairs, menus, linens, bowling equipment. They were fine with that. Some of these things didn't bother them too much. Some of them they already had. Maintenance of bowling greens, audio visual. So that's a big one. So all the TVs, all the audio visual, all the speakers, all the systems that you have, significant investment into that, and that was all excluded. Shelving to storage areas. So again, you have to come in and start building all these shelves. It's just another, again, delay in the time of opening the club. Waste bins, cash tubes, safes and reinforcing strong rooms, blinds and curtains, massive investment, blinds and curtains. All external, internal club signage, advertising and menus, artwork, sculptures, water features, landscaping and all planting. And another version of this exact same list, which we've gone through multiple versions of it. there was another section, actually wasn't in the exclusions list, but there was another section of it that actually went through and talked about how the air conditioning wasn't included either. So they do the ducting to it, but the actual systems and vents and purchase of the air conditioning wasn't included in this club either. So this club had, I think once we went through the budget with the QS, it came out at around about $6 million worth of costs they were still going to have to cover out the other end to finish off all of the items to the standard that they wanted to.